There's about 21, 22 people continuing to join. I'm gonna ask them to very quickly introduce themselves and tell you what school they're representing. And then I'm gonna give you the floor for some comments, and then we can turn it back to the teachers and staff for questions and observations. Go ahead, start introductions, Corey, please.
I just did what every kid does. My apologies. My name is Corey Graham. I am a 7th and 8th grade social studies teacher at Casa Grande Middle School.
How you doing?
Jose?
Jose Munoz. I teach mathematics at Casa Grande Union High School.
Thank you. Jared?
Jared Walther. I'm the interventionist at Vista Grande High School.
Brian?
So I'm Brian Mann, principal at Casa Grande Union High School.
Stacy?
I'm Stacy Brady, and I'm a science teacher at Casa Grande Union High School.
Glenda?
Hello, I'm Glenda Cole, principal at Vista Grande High School.
Lisa?
I'm Lisa Flores, and I teach 7th grade social studies at Cactus Middle School.
Melody?
I'm Melody Anderson. I teach science, 8th grade science at Cactus Middle School.
Deanne? Or Deanna, forgive me.
That's fine. I'm Deanna Addison. I work at Vista Grande High School in the special education department.
Thank you. Andrew?
My name is Andrew Hayes, and I'm 7th grade social studies at Cactus Middle School.
Dr. Gonzalez?
Hi, I'm Joetta Gonzalez, and I'm the superintendent at the Casa Grande Elementary School District. Good to see you again.
Same here.
Thank you. Has anyone joined after Dr. Gonzalez? I know Dr. Beebe is going to be joining us a little late. Did I miss anyone?
Hi, I'm Mercedes Clemens. I teach 7th and 8th grade social studies at Balago Middle School.
I'm Jennifer Kortzen. I teach freshman success, which is a college and career readiness class and life skills at Vista Grande High School.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Martin Hebda. I teach band at Casa Grande Union High School.
I'm Andy Anderson. I'm an instructional coach at Cactus Middle School and Casa Grande Middle School.
Thank you.
Jen Barron. I teach 7th grade language arts at Cactus Middle School.
I'm Sanina Gore. I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade English language learners.
Hi, Sydney. I don't think you remember me, but you went to St. Anthony's.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Nice seeing you again. Dr. Beebe?
Good afternoon, Steve Beebe, Superintendent of the Casa Grande Union High School District. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Rebecca Spollinger. I'm one of the ESS teachers at Casa Grande Union High School as well.
Thank you. I think that's all, Tom. Go ahead, and then we'll share the floor with all the attendees.
Great. My preference is to share the floor as much as possible because I want to hear from you. We are currently in a process in Congress of trying to negotiate an issue that you care about greatly, both from the standpoint of this virus, but also from the standpoint of getting the resources necessary to be able to have your schools safe, have the teachers and the staff of the school safe, and make sure that your children and the children of America are safe. There's a difference in the two thought processes. We want to basically put about $200 billion into schools across the nation to be able to have the testing, the tracing, the necessary PPE, and any other equipment, plus the ability to adapt to the hybrid system as fast as you can. It's not going to be fast enough, we all know that, but get as many resources out there as fast as we can. The one bill, called the HEROES Act, it's not going to be $3.4 trillion as people have indicated. It'll be about $1.5 trillion smaller than that. That's basically where the target area is. It will still contain a lot for schools and for the other ills that this COVID has brought us. But the other point is that we have another bill, the infrastructure bill, that also addresses education, about $95 billion for K-12 across the nation, and another $85 billion that would go to a development of broadband, mostly in non-urban areas. Steve, I see the ballpark behind you. Where is that at?
That's Truett Park in Atlanta, Georgia.
Well, I thought maybe I had not seen something go up and down in Casa Grande or something like that.
No. I was supposed to visit there this summer, but unfortunately plans changed with COVID.
But, you know, the whole COVID response thing, I'm a firm believer in local districts having control, but they need the resources available to them to do that. And I don't believe that so far that those resources have been there for you. My position is very simple. You need the testing right away to be able to do it. The testing has to come back as quickly as possible. And the tracing mechanism for the sake of the school and the sake of the community has to follow that as quickly as possible. That means that the testing kits that you have shouldn't be the ones that are 3 days to a week to get the results back. They need to be quick. And right now, I've talked to the superintendent of public instruction, I've talked to the governor, and I don't see that resource quickly available to you. So that's part of why we've asked for a tremendous amount of money to get that out to our schools. Even the PPE and other aspects of protection are not there. And so it's kind of a decision that you're all going to have to make. But the bottom line for me is the safety of the children, the safety of the teachers and the staff, but also knowing that the children, my wife just left the room. She was a teacher for 22 years. So I know the struggles you go through. Today I don't know these struggles that a teacher goes through, but it's a life safety struggle like never before. And the same for the students, that you're going to go from a closed environment to an open environment now potentially. So I would like to hear from you what your concerns are. We are going to try to find you as much protection as we can, but we have to get this bill through Congress. It's over in the Senate. It's been there for 110 days, plus or minus. We have come down $1 trillion first and then $200 billion and have shown a willingness to come down further with no movement so far. So we're at a level where we get much further and we can't really help the structure of what's going on within our society. And our intent is to stabilize America. If we don't stay as a stable country moving forward, we are going to be behind the rest of the world in economic development. Our children are going to be behind, our families. We don't need 1 million families out on the streets. We need them in their homes and being able to raise their children appropriately. And food. Those are still issues. No matter what you hear outside, those are still real issues in this country. The idea that our unemployment has shrunk, it's still at staggering levels across the country. The unemployment issue, we're trying to find a common ground for that to identify how a state like Arizona, unemployment means a different amount of money than maybe in New York. And I know it does from the standpoint of how much it brings to the table for those families versus their prior occupation maybe. But I also know that their struggles are at a higher level now because of food costs and other increasing costs that are out there, and availability, and then healthcare and some of the other items that a lot of those families weren't being pressured for when they were working in that capacity. So, and when we come out of this, another reason why we want to address this from a structural standpoint as well as a standpoint of the virus is that we'll somewhere along the line be at $5 trillion more in debt. That's at a 0 interest rate. But that doesn't mean that the struggles that you're going to go through after we're done here are going to be something that can be addressed quickly. because that amount of debt, and I just heard a thing today, it's more debt than we had coming out of the Second World War. It's going to take a while. Our economy does have to regain its ability to compete. And we want a world that our children can have a good quality of life and be able to compete as they grow up within our society. So we can't afford to get behind other nations that they want to compete with us, and they have taken a different path. And I won't get into that too much, but in addressing this virus, different countries have taken different paths. And so with that, I'd like to open it up because it's really important for me to hear what your struggles are, what your concerns are, whether it's from a safety perspective or how the children are going to be taught. I know the bill contains a tremendous amount of more hotspots. Casa Grande might not be as in much distress for that as other areas, but right outside of Casa Grande, I know you are. And in rural areas, I know that there is. In tribal lands, there's a tremendous need. And for the future of America, broadband is going to be an integral part, as it always has been, on education, healthcare, and competition. So with that, we'll open it up and start to discuss things.
And Tom, for the sake of keeping order, I'm just gonna go back and ask the participants for comments in the order that they were introduced. Corey, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Congressman.
Hi.
I really don't want to take much time because there are much more important people that have things to say here. But I just think that I think on the student side, it's been a mixed bag so far of the distance learning. Like the kids are, I talked to a few today about it, and they just, some were really, I mean, they were positive. They really enjoyed the independency of it, and it kind of gave them a college atmosphere, where others were kind of on the other end, where like they feel as if they're missing that social interaction. So I think that's kind of been a mixed bag for me. Teacher-wise, I just think that, you know, it's figuring out how to do everything day to day. Our district's done a great job of providing support and everything for us, but just every day we're learning new things. How to copy paste certain things for some people is the struggle, while others, these millennials have really helped us this time. But I think that's been the other thing. It's just kind of the training aspect of the digital age. And when we go back to live learning, whether it's a hybrid type environment or a live, we don't want to just go away from all the new things that we've learned. So that's kind of where I stand. I think we just, as teachers, go day to day right now. We're just kind of learning our new stuff, and like the trainings are the biggest thing for me going forward, so that we can continue to help everyone and reach everyone. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Corey. Jose?
That was fast. So for me, one of the concerns is being able to reach all of my kids. You know, we have a load, it depends, but it's, you know, anywhere from 150 to 200 kids that we have to try to reach out to. And I think you said it, a lot of them don't have the internet that they need or the connectivity to be able to get on. And that's one of the things, you know, being able to for them to have access to the internet so that we can reach them. Being able to communicate with parents. I know that a lot of them do have jobs and they have to go out and they have to work. So trying to keep in touch with them as well is going to be, has been a little bit of a challenge, because trying to get them through our regular school day, well, they're working also. So it's a little bit harder to find them. And we do reach out in the evening sometimes, but we don't always catch them all. So yeah, being able to communicate with the parents, being able to communicate with the kids. As far as training, I think that, you know, the state has stepped up, our district has really stepped up and provided some trainings for us. There are little issues that we can work our way around with, but I think that you also alluded to the other concern, which is testing. There's got to be a way for us to know, you know, quickly if someone has a virus or not. We know that a lot of times you can have people be asymptomatic, but in a school you can really see, you know, how one person can really, you know, pretty much take down the entire community. So that's one of the important things for me. Being able to be tested and be tested regularly to know that we are okay and that we're not spreading the virus to our other kids, because it only takes, you know, a couple of kids that come in sick, and then the entire community is infected. if when we do come back to a prison and a face-to-face type scenario.
Well, thank you for the comment. I would like to say that part of what we're trying to do is address childcare. Now, a lot of families will be able to have childcare within the family structure without impacting jobs. But for those that do have jobs, teachers included, we want to be able to provide a process where it's a safe transition from where children at home are now to childcare for those younger age, under school age people, and then move over to what the child care facilities need to be able to not transmit the same disease we're all having. So it's, in a lot of respects, it's similar. And we have $10 billion for that. That's a guesstimate. You know, the first CARES Act was 2-point-something trillion. That was done in 2.5 weeks. Too quick, too many things that were not done, but if we weren't quick, then we would have to dig out of a much deeper hole. And we adjusted as we went along. But now that we know a little bit more and society knows a little bit more, I think that we've clearly identified that a lot of that transition of how children are going to be, where they're going to be, and how they're going to be treated and safely. That's still a big, it's a guesstimate, but from our side, it's a guesstimate on the side of, I'd rather put more in there and draw it back than put too little in there and not have the ability to quickly address those issues.
One of the other concerns I forgot to mention was, and I don't know, what plans have been made, is getting food to our lower income people, kids. We know that, usually it's one parent or both parents that are working, and usually the food pickups are during the daytime when parents are at work. So I don't know if that has been looked into or there's a plan for that, providing a pickup later in the evening for parents to come back from work and pick up food for their kids. Because for many of these kids, that's the food that they rely on, is the food that they're getting from school. Thank you.
The two things I can tell you is I think it's getting down to that micro level of who's going to pick up what and what time it takes place is more of a localized area. Our area is going to be in providing the amount of money necessary to increase the food programs that we've already increased by 15%. We're going to, I think we have common agreement that we'll increase those programs by 15% again. So that's on both sides of the aisle. On the transportation issue, that's another issue. And on childcare numbers, as far as how much we're going to invest, is a discussion point right now also. I think these discussions can get over with in a week if people just start to put more pressure on us.
Thank you, Tom. And yeah, I forgot, I'm so sorry, Jose and everybody else. Adam Finkel, our legislative director, is on the line as well. And Adam and I have been talking about that precise issue, and I'm sure that he's briefed the congressman. We can revisit that. I'm gonna go to Jared next.
Hi, Congressman. So I'm going to be brief as well. My biggest concern is just our students and their abilities to get connected with our teachers here. I call people or call our students and their families every day. And, one story from today was the kid was doing all his work on his cell phone because the hotspot wasn't working. And just so basic things like that where we can get them connected. So that way our teachers can work the magic that I know they do with, trying their best to get these kids to the levels that they need to be. So basic connectivity is kind of my biggest concern. And that's what I've learned from talking with the families in our district.
And I'd probably like to have a further conversation with you because of your intervention process and more knowledge on that and what it's meant over the course of COVID, because it's an extremely important element of how our kids are going to be able to address some of their problems later on. And we do have a mental health care aspect to the bill also. That's a pretty high amount of mental health issues that can be taken care of because we know, as you do, and everybody on this call does, that it's something that's happening in our society and we have to overcome it faster than slower. And I'm also glad that you've never had to intervene in my 51 years of marriage. That's a good idea to not have interventionists along the way. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Brian.
Range of concerns from learning to unmute yourself, I guess, to the rest as we navigate this. We talked about the PPE equipment, and there's obvious challenges to that supply line. So while the district has great intents and we've made purchases, we're dependent on suppliers. And so when those suppliers or there's concerns over whether or not that supply will be steady, it makes it challenging to guarantee to staff, students, and parents that there will be appropriate equipment for the long haul. We've already talked about the equity issues with regards to internet connectivity. One of the challenges there is multiple students, even with broadband. So outside of our district, another family that I've worked with from the Maricopa community, they have 3 children. They were given a hotspot, but the hotspot had a limited data plan on it. So between all 3, while it might have been sufficient for one of the 3 children, it certainly wasn't sufficient for all 3 with the demands placed on them. Unfortunately, a lot of the strategies that we try to use in education with online learning is more virtual face-to-face time than it is just rote paper pencil, and it takes up a lot more bandwidth when you're streaming and downloading lots of videos and equipment. So that's been a challenge. The other one is just the infrastructure itself. We're dependent and somewhat slaves to the big corporations. Whether it's the Microsofts or Teams or Zoom or any of those entities, and their planning or lack thereof or lack of understanding of just how much was going to be a demand on their systems at this time as we're opening up schools, across the nation. And so that becomes a challenge that we can't address directly. I appreciate Jose's concern for the food for children. Definitely there's concerns when we know that a lot of these students, their safe place is school, and that's somewhat been taken away from them for legitimate reasons, but we need to find different answers then for how do we keep them safe where they're at. And that includes some other special populations, whether it's our students who are on our exceptional student services on IEPs or 504s or our English language learners. All of these groups are already struggling, and in a virtual online world, it compounds those issues tremendously, regardless of how well we teach online. It's just not an ideal situation for them. That becomes more challenging when you consider we're already in a teacher and staff shortage, which seems really odd when there's such a high unemployment rate. But trying to find qualified people who are able to come in and do what it takes to be a teacher and to address that is already a challenge with COVID. I will tell you, more and more people did not want to come into education. It was difficult to hire just for the normal staff needs. And then you challenge that with a sub shortage on top of that. And a lot of our subs tend to be those that are retired teachers, and it puts them at the higher risk population. So even if we want to reopen, the concern becomes how do we reopen safely in any model, hybrid or otherwise, where we have reduced populations if we cannot guarantee staffing if somebody does get sick. And we know they're going to get sick just in normal operations, let alone with COVID. I think we need to address some of the future funding concerns that are going to hit us due to lack of taxes in the current year because of the economy. We could use some better direction, I think, at all levels from federal and state leaders in terms of clarity of direction. We get a lot of, this is not a requirement. These are strongly suggested. And that leaves a lot of ambiguity, and it creates a lot of in-house fighting. And so the lack of clear and specific, concise direction has been challenging for all parties. And politics aside, for whatever reasons that occurs, it puts school boards who are unpaid in horrible positions to make very tough decisions around the lives, safety, and education of people we care about. We mentioned earlier the need for additional training. Schools, I think, have done a phenomenal job. I really applaud our staff and just how well they've picked up the gauntlet and ran with it. But we need ongoing training for a new world that we're embracing for all of the online solutions that we're coming up against. And I hope within there, we also start to abandon some of the archaic educational methodologies around Carnegie units of instruction and requirements for how we collect funds with ADM. It really ties our hands and keeps us from being as creative with our solutions as we might be otherwise. That's also challenging when you consider some past funding deficits that have impacted schools, especially in Arizona. I can't speak for other parts, but when we don't have funding for things like at the high school level with 9th grade funding for our career technical education funding that's been taken away, buildings and maintenance issues have never been fully funded. And I get some of those are state issues, but it needs to be addressed at all levels because it compounds the difficulty that we're having right now. And I guess probably lastly is transportation. We have the same struggles. I don't know a district that can fully staff all the people who drive buses. It is a thankless job. I bless bus drivers. They have a hard thing to do. And with COVID having to have reduced capacity, we're going to need more buses, which are very expensive, and more drivers, which are near impossible to find to begin with, driving more miles. And so that's going to become a real challenge, especially if this stays our new norm. And I appreciate your consideration of the social emotional needs. Online education is not the answer for social emotional. We know over and over again, screen time is not a healthy solution. Kids don't learn best online. It is a modality, but it is not the best modality. And the emotional challenges that we see continue to grow with the stresses we put on them. Nationally, we put more stress on our students than any other nation. And if we can find a way to redirect how we expect people to measure themselves and measure success, and it's not the whole race for Sputnik again, I think we'd be doing our nation a much better blessing with a future population than a bunch of people, taking meds because of the anxiety issues that we're causing them. So thank you for hearing us out.
No problem. That's my job. And it's one of the most important issues we face as a country. Education, I was on the education committee in the legislature for a number of years. It was a continuing struggle to try to address those issues. And then all of a sudden, 07, 08, 09 hit, and the cut to education still hasn't been made up. Cut by $1 billion then, and if you count population growth and inflation growth, you're far from where you need to be, even to be at the levels you were in 08. So that's a challenge that everybody has. And I know we're, thankfully for some initiatives, I think we're going to try to address it again. The other thing is this whole concept of what education looks like. I don't think we can address that today. But what we can address is that there's a need to do that. And I think that it's going to be a major focal point in Congress because of all the Congress people I talk to that are extremely worried about this situation. And in the larger context, we have to stop looking backwards and start looking forwards. Backwards, we can get into all the political BS that you want to get into, but it doesn't help us moving forward. And so, but we do need a different organizational structure to this process. You mentioned supplies. I don't want to see all the schools competing with one another, or all the cities, or all the states competing with one another for supplies. We should have a supply chain that works, that we can get the lowest price possible. If there needs to be some subsidized processes, it needs to get in there, because this is holding up the success of the entire operation. Command and control is what the Army lives on, military lives on, and they know logistically that has been successful. No matter what military, no matter what car company is in the nation or the world, they don't understand that the process doesn't materialize if the product isn't at the doorstep when it needs to be at the doorstep. And so this is what we're hoping the organizational structure moves towards. We're hoping that there's more accountability and responsibility. We as federal government have to take on more responsibility, but not overtake that responsibility to put more burden onto the private sector, meaning schools, and allowing that to disrupt this movement forward. And so I think that that's a key issue as we move forward, and we do have that debate going on now.
Thank you, Tom. Stacy?
Hello, I'm a science teacher at Casa Grande Union High School, and I've been there for about 20 years now. And Casa Grande has been my home for a very long time, and so I feel like I love this community a lot. And what I'm hearing and seeing from families and from my students is that they understand why we are remote learning, but they want to come back to school very, very badly. And we want our students to come back very, very badly too. But we want to do so in a way that's safe for them and safe for us. And my biggest concern, looking at going back into the classroom at the beginning of next month, possibly, is the class sizes that have been growing and growing and growing every year. And even if I cut my class size in half and see half on one day and half on another day, it's still a big number of students, 17, 18 kids each day. And then if the students who are currently doing their remote learning actually then decide they want to come back to school and are factored back in, then we're looking at over 20 kids in the classroom each day. And so those numbers are huge. And I know that there's the teacher shortage, like Mr. Mab mentioned, and trying to find teachers to come in and teach during this time is very difficult. But it's the class sizes that worry me a lot as I look at my rosters and the number of kids that I would see, even if we cut the numbers in half and I see half on Monday and half on Tuesday, the number of kids in each class in those smaller classrooms, it's a large group of kids. And I know that that's one factor that worries teachers as we look at going back to school in another month or so. And then the other one that teachers are just afraid because they themselves have a disease that makes them compromised, or that they have a loved one that they live with that is compromised. And what alternatives can they, what alternatives do they have? Can they be a remote teacher, or can they, is there some protection for them? So I think that that's a big concern, is how do we protect our families when we go back to school? So that's kind of what I'm hearing from colleagues and just from my own son. I have a 16-year-old who goes to school, and he's like, Mom, I can't wait to go back. I can't wait to go back. And I'm like, I know, I get it. But I think as a teacher looking at it, it worries me, the number of students. And I've seen like those pictures this morning. There was one on the news of students congregating and being together, and that supervision of the students out there to say, spread apart, make sure you're wearing your mask. It's going to be a challenge, but I think that it's going to be a challenge to teach the kids that, but I think we can do it. It's just going to take a time to teach them what to do and how to do it.
Right, and I agree with you. First of all, teacher shortage, it was going to be bad before COVID. And now COVID's hit and it's going to be worse. And we have to be aggressive on being able to be competitive for those teachers that are out there, and create the environment within our schools that will allow them to feel, I'm going to a school system that's safe and is considerate. The other issue is the guidelines that we talked about a little bit more. I've talked to the state superintendent of public instruction, and they want to follow CDC guidelines. That change every week, for crying out loud. And they change for different reasons. But the one change that should be made consistently is that it has to be based on the consensus of the scientific community. There's not one politician in the world that knows anything about the science that has to go into this process. So we must listen to our experts, just like we need to listen to our teachers, because none of us are experts on what your children think and how they need to learn and all that other stuff. So, and that goes for other industries too. So that's part of the problems that we have, is we'll have vaccines are going to come, which nobody knows. And we have CDC changing their mind about what should be a guideline and what shouldn't be. No, that's where if you're saying guidelines, then you don't want responsibility. And we're having a discussion with the state about this now. because somewhere the buck has to stop. If it stops at state level, fine. But we can't have 50 states and thousands of counties and tens of thousands of schools, and then the private sector going out after the same needs and not having something uniform that's coming out and being supplied at a price tag that's going to make everybody be able to get the product. And so that has to be still overcome. And hopefully we'll get there. But thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Oh, I want to.
Thank you, Glenda.
Oh, well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I, as an adult, I look forward to go. I'll be back in Washington next week and the week after and the week after that. I look forward to getting back there to be able to work better in an environment that we can network better, we can work with our staffs better. It's a much different environment. This is my 10th one of these today. I'll do 10 tomorrow and 10 the next day. And at the end, I'll do about 50% of what I really need to do from input that can be done so easily somewhere else. And I miss friends, and you miss friends. And so I just can't imagine the psychological side of a child and what they're going through and their concerns about their health and their family's health. So that's why I think a lot of healthcare issues mental health care is going to be involved, but it's the expansiveness of all of healthcare, because we have a system that was so concentrated on the virus that it broke down in the other sectors, and we have to build those up, and we're trying to do that now. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenda?
Thank you. Hello, Congressman.
Glenn.
I'm principal at Vista Grande High School here in Casa Grande. And first of all, I want to start by saying thank you for saying listen to the scientist. That has baffled me all along. I don't know why we wouldn't listen to the experts. Moving on, our district, I believe our district leadership has done a good job trying to figure out how to spend money on the sites when we come back regarding PPE and so forth and so on, and letting us kind of be creative on how we think that we can use that, and asking our teachers, so forth and so on. Some of my concerns my big one, I think, is that I'd say at least half of my students are rural. They come from Arizona City, Toltec area, reaching all the way to Eloy on the east side, all the way to the west side to Maricopa, where Hidden Valley meets the Maricopa city limits almost, and south to the Tohono O'odham Reservation. I do have students here in town. Yes, we have students that are on the bus for over an hour, get up very, very early in the morning to get here. And of course, as you can imagine, we've got students who haul water in the Hidden Valley area and into their homes, their families do. And so as you can imagine, as others have already said, internet connectivity is not good out there. Our district has worked to provide hotspots, but there are some areas that just a hotspot just isn't working well. So we have done some things to try to invite them in. And we've got one of our gyms set up for students when they need to come in, and they can work in there an internet environment, so to speak. Some of the things that I'm hearing have already been said, so I'm going to just go over those briefly. Frustration on the part of parents regarding connectivity, getting what they need, understanding their students' schedules right now, everything that goes along with this brand new world we're trying to navigate, and we want to keep our parents and our students feeling as comfortable as possible, and that's been very, very tough. Returning, a couple of my concerns are hearing from my staff that there is some fear as far as interacting on a daily basis with teenagers, especially at the age where they can drive and have more freedom, so they're not under their parents' wing all the time, and then bringing wherever they've been into the school. There is some fear there.
Yes.
and also childcare when staff returns. They're trying to figure out how they balance because their children's schools may not be going back, and so they're trying to figure it out. Our district leadership is looking into some ways to make that happen. And our sub shortage, oh my goodness, we've lived with a sub shortage as long as I can remember in education. And like I'm echoing what others have said, this is not going to be getting any easier with this going on because they are mostly retired folks doing that. And so the whole reopening safely is a concern. The teacher shortage we've already talked about, and probably one of my other issues is the unknown. We've gone through a lot of unknowns, and one of the big unknowns for me, worrying about how to keep our students and classroom sizes at the right level, is not knowing what teachers may decide after weighing this, that maybe they're not ready to come back. And so what we're going to be doing with our students who come back, because our district, our board just voted last night to return on September 28th. And so the teachers got the news today, and now they're weighing their options, even though they're working very hard. And I know they miss the kids. They're balancing that with a fear. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. First of all, 3 or 4 months ago is when the government should have been starting to, even before then, to be able to start to understand what do we need for our schools to be able to open up, and gotten it going. I can tell you in March, I chaired a committee meeting with another co-chair, and we had scientists in and researchers and people that worked on every pandemic up until the mid-80s. And they were very forthright. They identified clearly for us what we needed to do. They identified what resources we were going to need. They identified timelines on the virus and everything. And then in April, about 50 of us sent a message to the task force saying, in order to open up, here's what you're going to need. And everything we've talked about today is in there. We have to get in front of this. We can't continue to stay behind this process. We knew by April that this was a big issue, and in order to overcome it, we need to take a firm action. Here we are, let's move on. But we can't afford to tread water anymore. We as a government just cannot allow ourselves to do that. And so we have to listen to one another, but your requirements to open up have been known for months. There is no hope that a vaccine comes. If it comes, great. Thank you for the miracle. But if it doesn't come, we had to be prepared a long time ago to be able to get us to the point where we could open up businesses and open up schools and have an economy that was moving forward instead of the last minute process. So that what's said is said, what's done is done, but it's time that we not start sloughing things off of, well, the vaccine's going to be here in November, or the vaccine's going to be here right after the first year. Nobody knows that. The people that are researching it don't know it, because I've talked to them. And so we have a lot to overcome as a society in coming together. That's what we need to do, is we have to realize we're all in this together. Whether you want to wear a mask or you don't want to wear a mask, but you want to go to work and not wear a mask, then you're part of the problem why you can't get into work. So if you want to use, I want to go to work, then wear a mask. If you want to use the excuse, I don't want to bring it home to my mother because she's 90 years old or 80 or 70 or whatever, then wear a mask. Or my children, wear a mask. That's the best vaccine that we have right now. And by the way, we don't have the therapeutic drugs necessary to overcome this virus. There's 2 tracks, therapeutic or vaccine. And even with the vaccine, we need the therapeutic. We've been working on both of those. They have so much funding that you can't believe it. Now, you would wish schools had that much funding right now, but they don't. But we have to overcome this emergency. So just to give you an idea, what you're asking for now was known months and months ago.
Then I'm gonna go ahead and continue with the roster since we're gonna just make sure that the other meeting is aware. I believe Martin is up.
Hello. Thank you for taking the time to listen. That really means a lot.
Thank you, Mark.
I do a lot of reflecting, and as I kind of reflect on our situation, I find myself being really proud often about just everything when it comes to my sphere of education, whether it's my kids in 4th, 6th, and 8th, a wife that teaches at the middle school. I'm at Casa Grande High School. But everywhere that I come in contact with, I feel like everybody has the right visions and the right goals, and they're doing everything they can what's best for students. And I'm real proud of at my school when the department chairs get together and I have administration that listens. That's just really awesome. So and that's everywhere in the entire district, and I think in education, I think that's really healthy, and we've taken a really good step forward with that. Some of the concerns that come to my mind, I'm not going to rehash any of the other things that kind of came through. Corey mentioned at the very beginning that every day is a learning day, and it's so true, where day 2 was so much better than day 1, and week 2 is so much better than week 1, and we get moving forward. That I get nervous when we have these transition times, because there's going to be a transition to where we're in a hybrid, and Jose mentioned that it's difficult to reach these students, to reach these parents, and how do we communicate that to them? And we're doing everything that we know how, and still we're not able to reach them. So I get concerned with that, because every time we have that kind of dip back, I get worried about content. Are we able to get the content to students that we need? I see students oftentimes that are afraid to open up, and I'm really good in my classes. Students have their videos on, but
No, he told me to come.
They'll just be quiet. And
One second. Blanca?
Yes.
Tell them that I need an extra 15 minutes, okay? I now see it's the American Medical Association, so I better meet with them too.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, all right. I see students that are afraid to open up. And I think as teachers, when we really try to build relationships and we try to make those connections, it's difficult over the screen. So I'm excited to be able to see students again, just to try to help them with a lot of anxiety that they feel, and they don't even know what the anxiety is from a lot of times, and anger and fear that they have. So I'll cut right there.
Thank you. And it's my belief that our schools are going to have to consider asking government to supply much more help. I said not many more, but I was going to talk about people, but much more help in mental illness issues, because of mental health issues, because it's going to come streaming all over the place. So, and we're, as I said before, we're trying to work with that. And I am sorry, I will extend this 15 minutes.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I sent a text that you're gonna be a few minutes late. Lisa, go ahead.
I won't echo what everybody else said, because those concerns are, they are what they are. My biggest concern is in Arizona, we have a problem putting kids first. You come on and tell us that we're going to get CARES money, and we do some of it, but it needs to be equitably distributed. We need a funding formula in Arizona that's going to make sure that every kid in every school gets the same amount of money. We need a governor in Arizona that is going to put kids first and put health first, and quit playing politics with the budget every year. All of this is not just pandemic related. It's been a spiral in Arizona for many years, and it's just worse because we were so far behind when the pandemic hit. We're now trying to dig ourselves out of a much deeper hole than some other areas. And so if we're going to say the federal government's going to give us money, then our government, our governor and the legislature need to make sure that they put the money where the intent was for that money to go, instead of reinterpreting, repoliticizing, and then not putting money where it needs to be. Nothing's going to change in Arizona until kids in all schools become as equally important and get equal funding. Thank
I
you.
agree with you 100%. And one of the things we're trying to do with these bills, and you always get pushback everywhere, is to actually go around the government. And so to send it to the superintendent of public instruction that would lay it out for people in a fair way. You have to have some funnel system, but it has to get around the hardcore political system. And that's what we're trying to structure. The tribes had to wait for 2 extra months to get the funding, and even then, ALOSU came in and couldn't get the funding for 3 months, even though they were getting COVID all over the place. And so in small towns, I mean, they got theirs months and months later, although their police officers were working and their firefighters were being laid off. So we know we have to address that issue, and that is on the front end of both sides of the aisle, that this has not been an equitable process, both from the business side and getting down to small businesses, and we changed that pretty fast. But the concept with education didn't come up until about 2 months ago, and how we got that money and can get that money out to the educational folks. So we have to get around it.
Thank you.
Money, too many people don't want it.
Melody, I'm gonna ask you to go next, and then I have bought the congressman another 15 minutes before his next event. I'm gonna ask Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Beebe to sort of jump ahead of the line, and then if we have any time, we'll continue with Jennifer. So it's gonna be Melody, Dr. Gonzalez, Dr. Beebe, and then go back to Jennifer. Melody, go ahead.
And just a second, Melody, if you would. And Blanca, I want a list of all those that didn't get to talk and their phone numbers, and then we'll call them up.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd rather have Dr. Gonzalez have this time than me have this time. I think she has more important things to say than I do. The only couple concerns I have is class size. The rural, Native, and Hispanic populations are disproportionately affected by not having hotspots to internet. I have a really high population of students with underlying conditions, like really high. And then my final point is that last year I was a service coordinator of 30 kids. 25 of those 30 kids lived with their grandparents without a parent in the house.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a really big concern to me, because if they go home and take it home to grandparents, it's heartbreaking. I don't want them to have that on their head, that they may have taken that home and caused their grandparent, that is their sole caretaker, to get sick. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you very much.
You.
And most of those issues we know about. I hate to hear the fact about the 30 kids that have that situation of grandparents are the provider, but that's sadly part of society today. But that does have to be overcome, because we have to find a way, and that goes to partially to testing. If we get quick testing, we don't have to, and we know those parents go back to a home with people that are older, that we can try to address that as best we can, or get the better teaching for them in another situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Gonzalez?
Blanca, I really appreciate you skipping over to me, but I was going to defer anyway, because I get to talk to you and I can send communication to Congressman O'Halloran at any time, but it's not very often that our teachers get this opportunity. So I'm gonna defer.
Thank you so much. Dr. Beebe?
And I'm going to follow Dr. Gonzalez's lead. I was excited to be here, but as superintendents, we get the opportunity to have our voices heard. And I think the Congressman has already addressed some of my concerns. You know, I think my biggest frustration with all this is we were told to close our schools in March and didn't get any type of direction until August 7th. That's just way too long. We should have had a plan in place, you know, by July, I mean, by June, really, for us to return. So you already addressed this, so I know it's a concern. So I too would like to defer and allow teachers to have the floor.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Jennifer, go ahead.
Hi. So I'm speaking as a parent. I have a senior who goes to Union, and I'm also a teacher. So I'm speaking on both parts, and I kind of look at everything as just kind of what we can control. And I think what we can control is I want to make sure that there are plenty of masks and hand sanitizer at all the schools at every turn. My son works at Fry's. He works in a grocery store, and he's been working there since this whole thing has started. And he wears a mask, and he, and he hasn't gotten sick. He's around people all the time, and I'm sure people that are sick. So I just think that we need to kind of focus on also keeping it simple and just making sure that I think parents and students and teachers all want to be assured that we're doing what we can control to be safe. And I think it just kind of starts with the basics. Are we going to have enough masks? Because kids are they're going to forget their mask, they're going to lose it, it's going to break, it's going to be something. I don't know how many that's going to take, but I think that that's really important. And the hand sanitizer. I know just during the regular school year, me and the teacher next door, we buy our own hand sanitizer and our Kleenex and everything else. And we have a little station, outside our door for all of that. But I really just want to make sure that let's focus on what we can control. So
I appreciate that, and masks and hand sanitizer, and but we can control testing and we control tracing, because we want to think not just of the environment I'm in here, but the environment of the community environment also, because it's not, that school sends hundreds of children out the door and teachers to an environment that also needs to be addressing those issues of protocol. What type of protocol does a society have to address in order to not get into a situation this fall and winter that is much worse potentially than what we've overcome already?
Right.
And,
yeah, my son also is on the football team, and they've been practicing and they've been following all the CDC guidelines. His coaches are very good about all of that. And as far as I know, none of those boys have gotten sick. So I guess I'm just trying to say that we need to learn how to live with this and figure out what we can do in the schools as far as that, and just make sure we're taking every precaution and just assure everybody. So
there's no doubt that we can live with this.
Mm-hmm.
Where the doubt comes in is when it does happen, how fast can we get it under control, the hot spot under control? And how fast do we get the rest of the community to understand that if we all need to live with this, and we do, that they follow the appropriate protocols as an entire community also. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Deanna?
Hi, thank you. As I mentioned before, I'm at Vista Grande, and I am currently in school with students. I have kids that come in 4 days a week. The children that I work with have varying behavioral difficulties, and the team had decided for whatever reason that, a particular student would qualify to come in to be in the learning environment. So I have kids a variety of either 2 days a week. Some of my students, particularly those with autism, are in 4 days a week. And I do have a paraprofessional that works with me. And so our kids are coming in from like 8 to noon. Our kids eat with us quite often in the classroom. So, we've been working with food service in order to coordinate breakfast and lunch. And we are, doing sanitizing in our room as needed. Our kids stay in the same spot during that time, but then they also follow up with our custodial staff in the evening, and they've been wonderful. So I obviously second everything that everybody said. I agree with Jennifer that yes, it can be a very scary time. I am very lucky in that I don't have the same concerns that I know some of my colleagues have regarding their physical health or medical issues, or people that they come in contact with. So I don't really have that difficulty. But all of my kids are wearing masks, and when they need to take their mask off, we're social distancing them away from other kids. And I agree that we need to find a way to try to live with it, because what they're saying is that it's not going away. And I know that my students are really struggling. My own children, I have 2 students at Vista Grande, and one of them loves being at home in his pajamas, and the other one does not. But either way, I can see that they're not, the teachers are trying, but it's just not the same thing, and as having them in person. So while I appreciate everybody's perspective, I also think that there are teachers and paraprofessionals and other professionals in the school setting that feel the way that I do, that it's just as important for us to get back to school as soon as possible.
And I think that's what most of us want to see, but we also don't want to see. You saw what happened with the business community, and which overpowered the system. And the next thing we know, we had more and more and more people dying. And so we have to find that balance there. And I think the balance is the appropriate protocols, which can be followed within a school system or any other system. Because living with this virus could be a situation where it mutates and becomes worse instead of better. We now know that it might come back a second time. We now know that some of the vaccines that are in production or will be in production potentially have a short lifespan, and then they have to have more and more. And so it's a rough environment to be in, I know. And it's challenging for people, but we have to find a way to work together. And I'm 100% with you. We have to have children in school. That's the best place for them, but safely. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Andrew, and then before I end, because I do have to end, I'm going to go to Rebecca. She is a special needs teacher. To close the session, I promise you, Mercedes and Jennifer, Mark, Andy, Jen, Sydney, will all have a chance to revisit with the congressman. But I do have to make sure that I let him go. Andrew, and then Rebecca.
Awesome, thank you, Congressman, for meeting here with us. Mine has to do with special ed, so I want to hear what Rebecca has to say in terms of the individual students with IEPs and 504s, because my major concern that I've been facing is when we're teaching 30 students online at a time, the individuals, not all of them, but most of them have not been able to keep up at the pace that the other students can in that virtual setting. So as Lisa mentioned, equity with funding, where is the equity with the IEP and 504 students within the classroom setting in general education? I'm social studies, I'm sure science, language arts are seeing it as well, math. So I want to hear kind of what Rebecca has to say about the IEP and 504 situation.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you to everyone, and I really do appreciate getting to be here. I'm
1 second, please.
Okay.
Adam, are you still with us?
Andrew, yes.
No, Adam, my staffer.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, would you make sure you get those programs down? And would you repeat them, please?
Andrew, go ahead and repeat that. You said, go ahead, Andrew, I'm sorry.
I was just saying that the equity for the IEP and 504 students, my biggest concern I've been seeing 3 weeks into school now is that when they're being taught all virtually with the other general education students, they are not able to keep up at the same pace that they are. But we can't hold back an extra 10 minutes just for that one student, because then you have 29 students sitting there waiting to move on as well. And so it's not fair it's not equal, it's not equitable either.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
English language learners to that too. I'm sorry, but
No,
they're in the
you're
same
right.
program.
I think the biggest thing to mention is that I sit in my classroom 5 days a week. I work with a very high need population across the spectrum. I have some students who are with me all day, some students who are here on campus all day but have 6 classes, and I have a young lady who is in tears every day. One, because her teacher does not know how to use the technology, or because the teacher is talking and can't show at the same time at her pace and is trying to squish all of this into this more kind of hurried model. They're trying to get it in while the kids are live in front of them. And the biggest thing is she requires a lot of one-on-one support. And if our ESS staff, I work for more of an instructional support model, it takes me sitting one-on-one with these kids, pulling their screen up, talking to them about their grades. I can't do that virtually. I have the luxury of doing it because I have 1 or 2 each hour, but my counterparts had 30 in some of their academic resource classes. They are there to provide extra time reading tests aloud. They have a para in those classrooms sometimes when they're here on campus. Sometimes those paras are pulled because we don't have subs for them to cover for other higher needs students. So our biggest thing is, in this hybrid model, hybrid is not effective for any student that is not self-sufficient. I have a senior, I have a freshman, and I have a 5th grader. And my kids are tech savvy and are with it, and they're still struggling because they can't raise their hand and have somebody notice them physically and get that help in the moment. Another concern is, on top of the grandparents who are raising the kids, the digital and technology understanding divide is growing. I had a parent who is a grandparent tell me 2 weeks ago, tell me this in English because I'm already lost. These families cannot support their students in a hybrid model. They chose brick and mortar campuses for a reason. And
Right.
we are deeply stuck when we have such high class loads and high student populations that we have to stay hybrid to support their needs. And our families are desperate. They picked us because they know what we can offer is more than they have. And I feel like we're stuck, and that's where it needs to hit. We need some support to make sure that that divide doesn't get bigger. It needs to get smaller.
I believe in this situation, you and I and Andrew need to have a more of a conversation. So Blanca will set that up.
I will set that up. It's 5:12. I want to thank, and I want to make sure that Mercedes, Jennifer, Mark, Andy Anderson, Jen, Sydney, and I don't think I left anyone out. Make sure that they will have some time with you, Tom. I will make sure to forward all of those addresses. I want to thank both Dr. Beebe and Dr. Gonzalez. I want to thank the principals, Brian and I'm sorry, and Brent, Glenda, for joining us. I truly want to thank the staff for joining us, and I will make sure that the special ed teachers have a one-to-one with Adam as soon as possible. Thank you so much. I will. You will hear from me very, very soon, within probably before the end of the week. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and again, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time.